everyone. June is National Safety Month. So here at Homeland Security today, we thought we'd talk to CISA, who offers several resources. CISA is part of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and they are in charge of both cyber and physical security for the nation. So we are very, very proud to have Dr. David Mussington with us today. Welcome, Dr. Mussington.
Thank you.
He is the Executive Assistant Director for Infrastructure Security, and he currently serves in CISA since February of 2021. He leads CISA's efforts to secure the nation's critical infrastructure in coordination with government and, of course, with the private sector. So today, he's joining Homeland Security today to discuss workplace safety and kind of its nexus with Homeland Security. Many people don't think of workplace safety and Homeland Security as hand in hand, but as the San Bernardino shootings show us, and other mass shootings in general, workplace safety is an incredibly important piece to being prepared and to protecting our critical infrastructure. So with that, I will say, again, welcome to talking with us. And I know the last time I saw you, it was when we were giving you a mission award for all of your great work at CISA.
Very much appreciate that. And Christina, good to see you again.
Good to see you. So I've given a little background, but talk to us a little bit about really how your agency contributes to workplace safety during National Safety Month.
Of course, what we're interested in is making sure that workplaces are safe and secure so that workers can execute their jobs without fear, and in an environment that's trustworthy, trust-laden, and favors collaboration rather than people feeling at risk. So in critical infrastructures, which is our primary focus, but not our only focus, that means making sure that insider threats and any external threats to the workplace are at least understood and, if possible, properly controlled. To do that, we articulate best practice guidance. We have technical assistance that we can apply, and we also try to learn some lessons from unfortunate events when they occur across the sort of 56 states and territories where we are active. So it's really lessons learned from people's experience, inculcating confidence and trust in a workplace in the context of risk that we all have to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And really, the workplace and often where people do their business is the front line in safety and certainly in security. When attackers come, they don't attack the police station necessarily. They come after, soft targets. So tell us a little bit more about some of the free workplace safety resources that you offer, like the bomb prevention guide, and even the insider threat mitigation program. All of those things add to an employer's ability to protect themselves.
No, they do. One thing we try and do is we try and customize the guidance we have to the specific work settings. So we have a bombing prevention guide, we have a de-escalation series of things for undertaking conversation and dialogue to try and assess a situation and see if it can be de-escalated, and giving guidance to people if it can't be de-escalated. We also have an insider threat mitigation guide that describes how to put together a program for risk mitigation that encompasses the needs of employees to liaise with customers and with business partners in a safe and secure manner, in a safe environment where, to the extent there are any clues that something might be amiss, that they are more likely to be detected. So it's about reproducible technique for detection of risks in the workplace. It's about empowering individuals, staff, customers, stakeholders to take action, meaningful action in response to those triggers. But it's also about doing all of that in a way that is consistent with what we try and inculcate in employees, which is trust, a culture of collaboration, and a culture of safety, so that people are able to execute their if they're a customer, execute their business. If they're an employee able to deliver services, the customers expect in a manner that they expect, without overly pressurizing them, even in the context of real risks.
So you mentioned the de-escalation series. So exactly what is that, and how does it help maintain workplace safety? Why was that created?
Well, it's created sort of to give, it's one thing to give third party guidance that's sort of generic about what to do if there's a tense situation. It's quite another to sort of give people techniques and phased activities that they can undertake uh, to give them high confidence that they understand the situation, how it's going to evolve, and what kind of actions might be necessary. So the de escalation series talks about sort of four functions that need to be executed. The first of which is recognition. You have to recognize warning signs of a stressful or at risk set of behaviors and situation, and recognize it and differentiate it from a non-risk prone situation so that one doesn't overreact. After recognition, there's assessment. It's important to assess in the context of triggers that are known, but triggers that don't empower stereotyping or anything else. So it's not as if it's a specific type of person, whatever that means. It's more about the behaviors that may threaten property or personal safety in a particular context. So after recognition and assessment, if the behavior is presented are heightening risk or at least concern, de-escalation is that process where one, through engagement, tries to reduce the risk content of an engagement with someone and undertake sort of mutuality of concern, I suppose, so that people understand that there's risk in a situation, that communication is necessary, and that you need to sort of de-escalate that situation to allow communication to occur. Now, obviously, de-escalation may not succeed. And if it doesn't succeed, you need to empower the participants in that situation, the ones that want to de-escalate, with the ability to take action to protect themselves and the settings that they're in. That means reporting on the content of that situation and perhaps taking steps to de-escalate it involving authorized third parties such as law enforcement or personnel or others. So that's sort of the de-escalation process in a nutshell, where we articulate best practice guidance. We have advisories and we have at CISA.gov information that people can access based on the lessons learned of others who have had similar experiences.
Absolutely. So that's kind of recognizing that someone may be escalating and recognizing the signs of that, whether that be through tone in email or behavior or whatever it is, and then using the techniques in the de-escalation process to help calm the situation so it doesn't elevate to violence.
I think that's right. It's in a sense, it's sort of binary because some situations can be de-escalated. And if they can be de-escalated significantly in a timely way, it might be to provide those persons who are in a heated exchange or access to other resources to allow them to deflect that hostility or that animus in more productive ways. And it might be also providing mental health or other services to someone who has other stressors in their environment that are causing them to adopt these behaviors. So it's less about finding a sort of perpetrator than it is looking at instances of escalation that may have mental health or environmental causes and remediating those as a point of departure. That is a different approach than some others adopt, but CISA is not a law enforcement agency. We are about risk management and deflecting and de-escalating risk to key functions into the American people as they go about their lives. So that's kind of our focus. We share that with parts of DHS, of course, also the Department of Justice, U.S. Secret Service, and others with whom we participate to develop these products.
So part of what is so terrific about your work is that you get to see kind of all of the best practices. And then you've been doing a tremendous job sharing those best practices with the American people, with the public. Can you share a few of those best practices with us?
So I think that one thing that we need to think about is understanding that triggers are only triggers if you have the right environmental conditions. One can't look at a specific type of person, be they a specific gender or race or of any other particular criteria. It's important to understand that it's about in the business setting, what information one has access to and what role-based restrictions make sense in that business setting against which one looks at whether a whether a situation is threatening or requires de-escalation. So it's based on evidence. It's based on the requirements and risk tolerance of the workplace. It's more about not necessarily equating safety and security, but talking about risk and risk tolerance, and looking at I think upfront expecting disruptions because life's sometimes disruptive, but knowing when that threshold is exceeded between disruptions that bad weather, storms, etc., versus behaviors by people. That's what we're talking about here. Versus behaviors that place at risk some aspect or value of a business setting. Obviously, the people are the most important part of any business or workplace. Businesses and workplaces have missions, and those missions need viability and need to be implemented. And so you're looking at the risk incidents to mission, risk incidents to people, risk incidents to property, risk incidents to safety and security of that setting as a complex phenomenon. So it's never just one thing. What you're looking for is deliberate decision making by those in charge, those accountable for risks in a particular business or institutional setting. They need to be empowered to make consequential decisions based on their judgment of what those behaviors indicate. And proactive judgment means having plans. It isn't episodic, sort of one day at a time. It's if you have a program for insider. Sorry, that's me. I'll turn that off. It's not about episodic responses to the clouds of the day. It's about a systematic program that collects evidence, that understands what best practices work in the business setting where they're presented, and it's about tracking against a baseline of departures. If the behaviors don't depart from the acceptable risk baseline, then I guess you're in a good setting, and it means that training of a staff and people with managerial responsibilities is in the right place. If behaviors do start to exist or occur in specific areas, for example, I don't know. Let me think about this. For example, if insiders start to click on emails that are spam, and suddenly IP from your organization starts to leak, which obviously no one wants to happen, the response is training to make people better at detecting suspicious emails. Equally, if one tracks against a baseline, one can limit problematic behaviors that impose risk on an organization in the bud by communication and by training. Continuous trainings required, obviously in the onboarding and offboarding situations. It's specifically required to intervene in behavioral processes to make sure that people understand what expectations are. So it's about the environment, it's about training to maintain a baseline, and it's about detecting the divergences from that baseline.
So I'm an employer and I want to put together a crackerjack workplace safety plan. Tell me where at CISA I should go and what you recommend they look at to develop their plan.
So, I think, not just because I'm from the infrastructure security division, I'll point to CISA's resources developed by our security program subdivision, where the de-escalation series and other work has been developed. And I think that there's a repository of best practices there for you to look at, especially the Insider Threat Mitigation Guide that'll tell you how to put together a program and optimize it for your business setting. After all, a small enterprise has a different program than one with multi-hundreds or thousands of employees. It'll also tell you about how to cultivate a sense of community in a business setting that might be a good way to control risk or tension at a macro level for a small to large office. It'll also allow you to advocate for your employees. After all, this is not punitive. What you're trying to do is create an environment where all can thrive and all can sort of have stable expectations about not running into these behaviors that will place the workplace and their personal safety at risk. You're also trying to make sure this is research based. After all, it shouldn't just be something, I may think I'm a smart guy, but I may not be the sole person you want to hear inside the threat mitigation insights from. So that's why we base our work in research that universities do, academia more generally, The U.S. Secret Service, National Terrorism Assessment Center, run by Dr. Lena Alathari, is a big source of scholarship and research insight that drives the best practices that we propagate. Uh, Having said that, all of this means adherence to practices within the context of a business at workplace. Um, you've got to police the baseline. So that means that occasionally one has to have the hard conversation with those who are repetitive um, challenges of the consensus, I suppose. The consensus being what the risk tolerance is for an organization in the behaviors of employees relative to scarce assets, to resources, to intellectual property, and to the mission sensitivities of those who pay all of our bills. Those things create a corpus of policy and planning to which we're all accountable. And it means that if there are challenges, people who fall short of the baseline, you need processes to correct. Hopefully, correction is enough. That is holding people accountable for their behavior. If it isn't, you need processes for doing more than that. And that's all part of an insider threat mitigation guide. One thing that we don't compromise on, and that no one should compromise on, is the physical security and safety of their staff. And that is a no-fail mission for us and for most people who have people for whom they're responsible. And I feel that way, and Director Easterly does, and so do most people who work in this area.
So those are excellent points. When we think about an attack on a workplace, or a disgruntled employee, a terrorist attack, a random attack,
Right.
really it's all those motivations don't necessarily matter. It's kind of like the concept in emergency management of all hazards. Like, whatever it is, the place has been decimated, or
Yeah.
you're trying to mitigate against the damage that can be done. So tell us, what do you think are 3 key action items for all employers?
Well, I think one is to pay attention to the risk setting that you occupy. It isn't as if it's a random event. If you have risk history, one needs to be aware of it, needs to document it, needs to have a program that's optimized for that purpose. I think second, one needs to avail yourself of the free services that CISA and others have to offer. There are sector risk management agencies that have services that parallel ours in terms of insider risk mitigation and overall lessons learned that are specific to an industrial domain or sector. So taking advantage of other people's misfortunes or successes is a critical thing. I think that it's important to avoid, and this is more of David Mussington's personal opinion, it's important to avoid stereotyping and anecdotes versus using evidence in one's response. Stereotyping can mean that behavioral risks will be misinterpreted, focus is only coming from a certain part of the community or only having certain triggers from a certain part of the community. That's a mistake, and it can lead to distorted responses where you end up with a employee morale problem, or you end up just missing an ascendant threat because your focus now is elsewhere. So availing yourself of CISA services would be my number one suggestion. Most of them are free. Availing themselves in a related sense of our technical assistance from our field force across the 10 CISA regions and the 50 states and 6 territories where we operate. Paying attention to lessons learned that are propagated in industry associations and among sector management agencies. And avoiding the stereotyping that can kill the credibility of a program, even if the on paper rules parallel things that we say. In execution, these things need to be implemented by people with some sensitivity. It means, one can think, for example, in a school environment where a school resource officer has to have a specific set of sensitivity because you're dealing with adolescents, and you may or may not be a sworn law enforcement officer. But in the school setting, it's more about guidance. It's more about supporting education and the education environment. So similarly, in a business setting, it's about supporting that productive environment that enterprise needs to have created in order to pursue its business in a safe and secure manner, in a risk acceptant manner, and in a deliberate planned manner, not allowing, to the extent you can control it, randomness to introduce sort of threats and risks to your staff. Safety and security of your staff is a preeminent value that can't be compromised. That's our approach, and I think that's the approach of most of the critical infrastructure folks that I met at Homeland Security Today's award ceremony, and that I meet as I travel the country and talking to critical infrastructure operators.
That's so excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your time. You'll see the link to connect with CISA at the end of this recording, so you can check out all the resources they have to offer. Dr. Mussington, as always, you are tremendous. The work you're doing on behalf of the nation is stellar. And so, we'll just have to give you an award every year. And for all of our readers, June is National Safety Month. We encourage you to assess your workplaces, create a stable and welcoming environment, and certainly check out all of the free resources CISA has to offer. So thank you for listening to us today. And Dr. Mussington, once again, thank you for joining Homeland Security today to talk a little bit more about National Safety Month.
Thanks, Christina, and thanks to everyone for listening.